I'm coming to you actually from New York City, where I am an architect and really looking at how we can design cities to function like forests, cycling all materials. So how can we create systems which enable organizations to thrive as they create good soil and community, like this beautiful mushroom here? And so I did lead the development of the Zero Waste Design Guidelines. They came out in 2017 in New York City to really help architects and designers ensure buildings and cities facilitate zero waste operations through design, and they allow circularity of materials. So I'm not going to go into detail, but just 2 slides as an overview. It really looks at strategies for planning for waste as a material flow through your building, diverting waste, reducing consumption to start with, and reducing volume. For example, one of these things on the right is actually a 3-story dish carousel that takes reusable dishes down to the cellar, where floor area is a lot cheaper. But we also need to look at designing food waste buffets so there's less waste, how we incorporate tracking and financial incentives, and really designing at a larger scale, designing the city infrastructure for reusable packaging and food serviceware. So it's just like a litter bin disposing of your reusables. And that's much easier to do if you're designing a city from scratch. And it was great to have the opportunity to do that with this floating city idea, which is being done in collaboration with UN Habitat. And the aim is to grow much of its own food, source sunshine and rainwater for energy and water needs. And we did the zero waste strategy. And we designed in systems for borrowing, reuse, repair, and circularity rather than single use and trash. So food grown on the island or coming by bulk from the mainland is all packaged in reusable containers, whether you buy it in the store or take it out from a restaurant. And all food waste is weighed before disposal, giving feedback for more accurate ordering. And then we have it moved by a small pneumatic tube directly to a small anaerobic digester, which creates heat and power, and the power goes into the electricity grid, and the heat warms the water to wash the reusable packaging and dishware. We also have food waste from homes and landscaping and farming going to the compost gardens to make soil and grow more food. And then there's no need for garbage trucks. Bulky items can be transported by cargo bike, and anything else, spent batteries, worn clothes, broken toys, get put in a reusable bag with an ID tag to identify the material, and then they're conveyed to the sorting center. And there, all residual materials are metered, like water or electricity, and sorted to facilitate repair, reuse, or refabrication. Of course, some materials will need to go back to the mainland for recycling. We're not going to be able to control everything that comes onto the floating city. But with data over time, strategies can be tweaked to reduce waste further and applied as evidence-based solutions to other cities. And so the city will welcome circular economy businesses, have co-ops for fixing and repair. Libraries won't just be for books, but anything from tools to musical instruments. And consumer goods, from electronic equipment to children's furniture, can be leased rather than owned and returned to the store when maintenance or upgrade is needed. So the aim is that you really don't need to own anything if you live on this floating city, except for personal things that you want to own, but you wouldn't have to own something and then sell it on like we do these days. And so goods, furniture, and buildings will all be designed for disassembly. So at the end of life, they can be repurposed into something new. And we're really excited that we've just started work on the design of a small prototype for the city. And it happens to be in Busan, South Korea, where they're already so far forward with their waste sorting and policies anywhere. So it's really a great location for it. But if we really look at this kind of ideal circular city and we look at all the flows of materials, whether that's food packaging, reusable packaging, discarded materials that can't be fixed, we see that there's a lot of circular movement of things that need to be washed or processed food waste. And it's very unlike the linear flows that we have in cities and cities are designed for. So New York City, like most cities, and San Diego, has goods in, trash out. And so it's a very different layout of the city. So I'm really asking, how do we transform cities to facilitate the circular material flows? And I also studied biomimicry, which has really inspired me, and it looks at how we can learn from circular systems. And if we look at ecosystems, they start pretty linear too. After a fire or a volcano, in come these pioneer species that take resources and grow and reproduce as fast as they can, kind of like our kind of growth-based capitalism today. But over time, these ecosystems become much more complex, diverse, and circular, like these forests, where most energy, water, and materials are circulated within the system. And so what are the three key attributes that increase as they do so? Those are collaboration, feedback loops, and niche specialization. So we have to design our systems so they help promote collaboration, they incorporate feedback, and they support those niche specializations, like those diverse local initiatives that fit in with the unique characteristics of a place. And so we've been doing this in New York City. We're doing this advocacy campaign called Put Waste to Work to try and change the system here. So we're looking at strategies that would help facilitate circular material flows, such as zoning and allocating space for reuse, repair, refabrication, and composting. And like many cities, we have zoning laws which are really based on that linear material flow diagram you saw. So on the outskirts of the city, these purple zones are all manufacturing, and they're on the outskirts, so they have less impact, but of course people still do live by them and they suffer from the truck traffic and industrial pollution, just like those who live alongside the remote landfills that get New York City's waste. So it's really a social justice issue too. But circular infrastructure and small-scale composting, for example, doesn't fall into current zoning categories. They have waste transfer stations, but not compost facilities or urban gardens. So Boston actually has done a zoning ordinance, and so has the US Composting Council, trying to help see how we could change zoning so cities can really support circularity. And we could make use of empty storefronts, like in Participatory City in London. So you invite people to drop in, develop ideas for community collaboration, many of which were about reuse, repair, growing, and making. And they're expanding into Canada. And I think it's a great idea of really grassroots participation in these kind of circularity initiatives. We could provide space for libraries of things, and we can make sure we design reuse into the city, because currently most reusable bins are like bus trays. So they're suitable for dining spaces, or they're like these good to go bins, which are very space efficient. If we're going to replace all single-use disposables with reusables, we need to design return bins that accept a lot more volume, a little like this Cup Club one where you can stack, because it's going to be quite a lot of reusables if we really design it fully into the city. Then we have, because we're in New York City, we have a lot of emphasis on containing, because we have bags in New York City and the real issues from that. As you can see here, it's a major quality of life issue, and they block sidewalks, cause rats and litter, and injuries to workers. But even so, shared collection is a good solution for many densities of neighborhoods, because you can have all streams deposited together, which allows you to have many more things. You don't want to have 7 bins outside every single house, for example. And following the guidelines, the Departments of Sanitation and Transportation have looked at doing Clean Curbs pilot programs for private collection. We think they should take it up a notch, like they did in Paris, where they piloted 40 of these recycling stations in the street, and then they procured 1,000, and that's been very successful. Because everywhere in New York City, we see systems that prioritize trash. Like there's a requirement for a trash chute and then recycling bins on every story. But if you then add organics, it's a lot of labor. So why don't we change the code like they did in Korea and Seoul? So you have to have a central waste room. Makes it much easier to track pay as you throw and much easier to have more waste streams. And I know I'm running out of time, so I won't go into detail, but the last part of our advocacy campaign is about composting, really to make sure we regenerate all city soils with good quality compost, and think of that as maintaining part of our green spaces. So parks do composting for the park, and other food waste gets processed maybe into fertilizer that can be used by the regional farm system. Sorry, I'm going a little fast in this, but sometimes you'll need two systems, one for the to compost for the use on site, and one to take the excess food waste to be used as fertilizer. And there's some good examples of that, like this park in Brooklyn, that the horticultural staff collect food waste and horticultural waste for the site. And the benefits for the city are huge. Because if we don't do this, what do we want our cities to look like? Full of storage buildings, unoccupied buildings, full of unused things, drowning in trash and litter? Or do we want circular cities with low impact transport, reimagined streets, libraries, farmers market, green roofs, and healthy street trees? That's what we have to decide.